Joining me now on set, Reid Wilson, founder and editor of Pluribus News that focuses on state legislatures. Faiz Shakir is senior advisor and former campaign manager for Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. And Sara Fagen is a former White House political director under George W. Bush and an NBC News contributor. Reid, you before this did your stint at the hotline after my time there. How would you... Is this Republican primary field starting to finally come together, or are we still not sure how big it's going to be?
You know, it's surprised me that it's taken so long to get going. I mean, this was the time when, you know, by this point in the 2008 race, Barack Obama had already announced. It was, what, February 6th in the very cold day in Springfield? February 10th, okay. Very cold day in Springfield. And,
it's the day I accepted the job at NBC,
okay,
so I do remember
There
that.
you go, yeah. It was, I mean, it's the... most of the field was in by that point. Now we've got most of the field is not in. But by the way, I think we're going to see a much different Republican field than we might have expected, than we certainly did 4 years ago, well, 8 years ago, in 2016. This year, I think it's going to be governor heavy. We're in this like golden age of governors now, where it's not just DeSantis, it's not just Nikki Haley, but it's.
We might not have many senators at all outside of Tim Scott. So how big is the field going to get? Is it going to be 6 to 8, or is it going to be 12 to 15?
Oh, I think it'll be 12 to 15 for a brief period of time, and then probably closer to 5 to 6, right? Because
when does it get to this 12 to 18? Is it over the? Are we going to see everybody get
18 in? 18 is probably too many, but maybe 12 to 13, 14.
Pre-4th of July? You assume by the 4th of July it becomes the peak?
Well, I think a lot of these people start exploratory committees and then may never launch. But if you count the
I would count those.
Yeah, if you count those, next 8 weeks, maybe 12 weeks at the outset, you've got to start to raise money if you're really trying to get serious and get on the debate stage. You've got to really start to move.
And if you're Pompeo or Sununu or basically anybody not named Ron, Don, or what has Nikki Haley done? Is it made you like, do I need to hurry up? What has her week done to your campaign, you think, right now?
Well, I think she's the first one in that, as you pointed out, isn't named Ron or Don, and so she is number 3 right now, right? Just because she's in the arena. And so I do think it causes folks to start to say, okay, if I'm going to do this, I've got to at least lay out a plan and start to execute that week over week, even if I'm not going to announce till June, you know, for example. And look, there are real benefits to being the first alternative in the race, and we saw that for her. I mean, she, you know, you saw this issue with CNN, with the anchor who said something unfortunate, and she's gotten a ton of coverage off of that this week. And
you know, Faz, I'm curious. You know, we're having a debate when there's not enough instances to say this is a trend, but it certainly looks like being early does have its benefits. You want to be around late, you better get in early. The later you get in, the less likely you're going to be around late.
I think right about now, if you look at the calendar, Bernie Sanders was jumping into the 2020 race, and we were at that time among the
late, right?
Yeah, late entry.
Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren had already got in.
And then Joe Biden gets in April, and you know, if you look at that trajectory, Elizabeth Warren was the first one in, and I would say if you're looking at the Republican field, that Trump's move was good. I mean, it was smart. I mean, at the time, you would say, what is he doing? Right. It was early. Like, there's no fanfare. It didn't generate anything. What it did is ice the field. Now, everybody who's deciding whether to jump in is, do I want to take the punch in the face from Donald Trump? Otherwise, I don't, and I'm going to quietly try to get into this race and say nothing at all, which isn't a threat to him then, because you need a friction. You need a fight against Donald Trump. Who's going to do that? No one's going to do that right now.
Well, I actually kind of think he's right. Are you? That Trump, look, in hindsight, Trump froze the field for a while and may have done the right thing.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. You know, you can't replay the last race, and so, you know, these are totally different dynamics now, and so I think, you know, a big challenge for these candidates is going to be how do they navigate Donald Trump, and how do they navigate Ron DeSantis if he does run.
But this, I mean, from my perspective, it feels like there's fear there in the field, is what I'm witnessing. I mean, I'm not a Republican, but it feels like you can feel the fear of people about whether they want to jump in because they know they're getting a punch in the face.
What do you make of that fear? I agree that you sense some hesitancy. Maybe it's donors who have been whispering in their ear, I don't know if I can help you out here because We don't want Trump.
I think Republicans writ large have, Republican presidential candidates are going to have a money problem. And the problem is the same for every campaign that you two worked on. You know, the moment you get into the race is also the moment you start spending the money that you raise. Recall people like Scott Walker, who ran out of money before they even got to a primary. Right. So at what point, but of course you need to be in to start raising that money. And now you've got donors who are saying, well, we need the alternative to Trump, so we're going to rally around one particular person, which means they're not going to sort of support the vanity projects that some of these presidential campaigns become. And then there's a broader point that, you know, in the age of digital fundraising, the online money has not been there for Republicans as much as it has been for Democrats. Take a look at a lot of the races, the midterm election races that happened last year. You would be stunned at the amount of money by which Democrats outspent Republicans. Even people like Val Demings in Florida, who got crunched by Marco Rubio, still outraised him by like $30 million bucks.
Money is less important than it has been, but I think because of the ability to raise money online, they can raise enough to stay viable for a while, too.
Well, that's what we found out. I mean, Rick Santorum and his pizza ranches proved that, and then suddenly he found a moment.
God,
that's right. And
please don't make us go to pizza ranches anymore.
And I think that Governor DeSantis is consuming a lot of the energy because that elite Republican class wants anyone other than Donald Trump, and he looks the strongest today. But there is likely to be a moment where he has a tough moment. Historically, every candidate goes through that.
I'm curious. I want to play the clip of Hannity asking an interesting question to Nikki Haley, because I think we're going to hear about it a lot. And it's just, what specific policy areas would you say you part with Donald Trump? Let's take a listen.
What specific policy areas would you say part with Donald Trump?
What I am saying is I don't kick sideways. I'm kicking forward. Joe Biden is the president. He's the one I'm running against. And what I'm saying is you don't have to be 80 years old to be president. We don't need to have these same people going back again. We need something new. We need a new generation of fighters. I'm not going to kick sideways. I don't have time for that. That's not my focus. I'm kicking forward. It's all about Joe Biden, and it's all about the people in America winning again.
You know, Faiz, that was a really good answer for the campaign of Nikki Haley to say. But it was, to me, an odd answer for the candidate herself, because that is the one missing piece of this week. I think she had a really good week. The one missing piece was, I don't know what she wants to do as president.
I hear someone running for vice president or wanting to make sure that Donald Trump feels positive about her. And you know, I think that that's fine for her own purposes. But if you're talking to a Fox News audience, the actual voters who will vote for you, you can't identify a difference with Donald Trump. That's going to be a fundamental problem for the message. What is it about? Because if you're offering Donald Trump light, people, I think the vast majority of Republicans are still comfortable with Donald Trump heavy.
I'm going to accept the premise that this is not the week to take Donald Trump on. I will accept that premise. But doesn't she have to at some point?
She will, for sure, have to, particularly as it gets closer to the time in which this really starts to matter, and there's only going to be 3 or 4 spots out of Iowa or New Hampshire. So she'll have to draw a contrast with him, and she'll have to critique some of the things he did in the White House that she didn't agree with, and have a real rationale for why it's okay that she stayed working in his office. I mean, that's going to be a challenge, or working for his administration. That's going to be a challenge for her.
You know, Reid, I'm obsessed with, I think the only useful document to understand a presidential candidate and what they might do is the announcement speech. Because it's the one thing that I actually think the candidate actually probably has thought about, has probably practiced in front of their mirror. I was surprised at how thin on substance it was.
I think we're in an era of thin on substance in a lot of ways. The more you offer to voters, the more you are critiqued for it. And I mean, recall this is the week where Senator Rick Scott from Florida rolled back a lot of his proposals, and Mitch McConnell had never wanted.
He wanted to be substantive, and look what happened to him, right?
Exactly. So the more substance you roll out now, the more that there is something for people to attack you. And if her goal this week was to present herself as a feasible alternative to Donald Trump, who looks a lot better and appeals to a lot of voters who will never come back to Donald Trump, then, you know, she had a good week.
I want to get you two to weigh in on something. We were having this debate in our political unit call yesterday, which was, you know, in 2008, and Faiz, I think you'd agree with this, there was a penalty for when Hillary Clinton went negative on Barack Obama. There was like a group of Democrats, the Daily Kos world, right? They would just jump, and it was like, she found herself, there were liberal media columnists would be like, what are you doing? And it really helped Obama. The question I have is, will there be conservative media that do that for DeSantis? And I don't know if we know the answer, but you accept that that was done for Obama?
Well, yeah, but I would still argue that it needs to be done because you had to rip the Band-Aid off. You're going to get there at some point anyways.
Right.
It's my point. And so you take the heat at some point. So if I were, I guess, what is your view or your strategy for Ron DeSantis? Mine would say you got to come right out of the gates blazing on Donald. I mean, at some level, have a critique of Donald Trump. Otherwise, he's going to eat you alive. You know he's going to beat you up. You're going to counter. And what, you're trying to float above it? I don't.
Do you think DeSantis will have a cocoon of protectors the way Obama had?
Certainly, I think he'll be the darling of the conservative press, but I don't think...
you never read a negative view about DeSantis in National Review, and I say this with, you know what I mean? Some of these places, do you expect that?
Yeah, but I think for different reasons.
Okay.
You know, I think that you've got the Democratic politics is very focused on identity and very focused on a lot of issues that Republican presses are just not. And so I think for different reasons. It's about Trump. It's yeah.
Well, that'll be interesting.
And hey, it might be really helpful for Ron DeSantis to make this a two-person race right out of the gate.
Fascinating. We shall see. Reid, Faiz, and Sara, thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.